sit down, it's time for the conversation. Joining me on the table tonight, Tony Watima, who's an economist, and Joe Gakuo, who's the CEO Oleum Holdings Limited. Did I get that right? Yes. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for making time. 1st of August, we sold 200,000 barrels at 12 million US dollars, which translates to 1.2 billion USD. The president was very proud and said, currently, we've joined the League of Oil Exporting Countries. What does this mean? Tony?
I think it's just symbolism that we are quite an oil exporting country. Because you raise expectations when you say we are an oil exporting country. Yeah. It means that we are enjoying huge revenues compared to oil producing countries like Nigeria, Angola, and all that kind of thing. I think that expectation needs to come down. We are not on that level. And so when you talk about an oil exporting country, it's just more symbolism. We are not yet there that we can say very confidently that we are oil exporting country.
Joe, big talk, no show?
Well, thank you for having us here. I would agree with Tom that we are not there yet, because remember, this is one of the milestones towards being a truly oil exporter. But as an oil industry fan, as a supporter of the industry, I am happy with the step. I would understand why probably it would be premature to say we are in the league of the nations of the oil exporting countries. But the journey has begun. So I think while probably a lot of people think we are there, for me, the journey has begun.
What does it take to be truly an oil exporting country? What's the difference between Kenya and Nigeria, Angola, South Sudan?
Okay, let's work with numbers. Nigeria produces around 1.5 to 2 million barrels a day. That's a day. Angola is also the second, produces around more than 1 million barrels a day. Kenya, we are looking at, when we are there, the commercially viable thing that we are doing after the early scheme, we are looking at 80,000 barrels a day. That's very minimal figure. You look at, in the world, we produce around 100 million barrels a day. Africa itself is 7 million. So if you factor in Kenya's 80 million, that it will be our peak. We cannot call ourselves tigers within this industry. I think we are at the lower level. And so the good thing is we need to manage our expectations that we are not an oil exporting country that we can benchmark ourselves with Angola or those kind of countries. Yes.
So if what I'm getting is right, we need to manage our expectations. Our reservoirs are not that big, and we're not going to get a lot from this project. And just before we came on the show, you were talking about Uganda that discovered it had oil some time back, but has not done anything. Why did Kenya then think or deem it wise to go forth and pursue this project?
Let us put this into perspective, because I think we are also focusing a lot on the fact that it's only the Lokicha Basin which has been opened up. Kenya, we have 4 basins. Lokicha and Rift Valley is one of them. So we have explored a very small bay of Kenya. So as at now, yes, the number may not look as good or comparable to the other nations in the world. But I would imagine that as we continue to explore more in the other basins, probably we will find more oil, potential for gas, especially in our coastal region. So the numbers may change, but the journey has begun. Yes, Uganda discovered oil 4 years before us. I mean, 6, because they discovered in 06. Ours was announced by the former President Kibaki in 2012. Yeah. It has taken them a while to get to 2019, where they are now discussing about FID. Probably the conditions, both casual, political, economic, are a little bit different, which may make Kenya move a little bit faster. Which would explain why maybe we are discussing about being an oil exporter. But take you back, and I think this even P.S. Kamau has confirmed that Are Oil was never a commercial enterprise.
What was it?
It was a test. You would test the market. If you are a farmer of tomato or cabbage, Probably you may want to go to the market to find out what the price is, what kind of size they want, who can take your product, which is exactly what we are doing. They have gone to the market. They have taken our crude, which is waxy. It's a bit different from the other crudes, to find out, one, what would be the price that we would get,
Okay.
which refineries can handle our crude when finally we do the full field development. And I am happy because if the figures we are getting that it is, it went at $1.2 million, it means we sold our oil at an average of $65 per barrel. Given that our oil, or the argument has been that, our price, the cost of producing is around $34, $35, then it means we're in a good space. We are not there in large scale, but we're in business.
Tony, you're the man who crunches the numbers and who does the business as his business. Voodoo economics, or it makes sense?
I think it makes sense at some point. But one thing that I wanted to, before I get to that question, there's something that my friend here said. I think I will differ with him a little bit, and it's about the economics of it. We look at the economic viability of what you've explored already. It's not what have you identified as the commercially viable oil deposits. If we look at oil explorers or oil exploration countries, I think everyone in the world has attempted that. And they have not joined that league of oil exporters. In Kenya, we started exploration in 1970s, but we found oil deposits so many years later. And so when we're guiding this debate about oil, one of the main things as economists we look at is what is commercially viable oil deposits. That's when that we can talk about commercial viability and we can do the maths around it. And so Kenya, there are quite a number of basins that are coming up, but until that we identify what are commercially viable that we can extract, now we can do the calculation on what exactly is the impact of oil economy itself. So that's the main thing that I want to do. So back to your question that you're saying about voodoo economics. It's not a voodoo economics. I think the problem is that we have not very little oil deposits, but the oil deposit that we have is not able to help us enjoy economies of scale.
Okay.
That we're able to produce at large scale and reduce our cost. So we enjoy more revenues in terms of oil exportation or oil exporting country. And so one of the main things that earlier that Kenya had planned is to use partner with Uganda, and so you're able to shrink your cost in terms of building a pipeline together. And so we shrink our transportation cost. So currently, the biggest thing that we are having as inhibitor is transportation cost. So we spent around, at estimate, around $20 to $25 per barrel goes to transportation and exploration and the extraction itself. So you look at the cost, we cannot enjoy those economies of scale if we are doing at around 700 million barrels that we have the total. Yes. So but the biggest problem will be if we're able to identify other basins that are commercially viable, the best thing for us. But for now, I think the cost is still quite high that we need to find a way that we can enjoy economies of scale.
I don't think the president would agree with you. When he was making that announcement, this is what he had to say. Take a look. Was that for me? Well, sorry about that. We'll go back to that. My director will let me know when we are ready with that. But the president, on the 1st of August, once we had sold our barrels, he came out to the nation and said he was very proud of the progress that we'd done as a country and the steps that we'd made. And he was hoping that the proceeds that we were going to get from the oil sale will go a long way into developing the country and a trickle-down effect. If we have the video, let's cross over to it right now. the proceeds from oil are supposed to, why are you laughing, Tony? The proceeds from oil are supposed to prosper Kenya and eliminate poverty.
We are very far from that, because one of the main things that you say, I might differ with the president. It's not different. I think it's being pragmatic. I think my job entitles me that you need to look at things from a pragmatic position. I think what he's saying is symbolic. It's true, but it's symbolic that we are joined the oil exporting countries, but we are yet to be there. And I like the statement that he completed with saying we are starting a journey. But looking at the numbers itself, we cannot say that this is what can move our economy to the next level in terms of economic impact, in terms of revenue that we might get on public revenue. And so we are far. And one of the main things that we keep forgetting about this conversation is that oil is a very, exploration is a very capital intensive thing. So the fact that the cost that we will be doing in this, going for the oil explorer himself in terms of getting his revenue, his capital back, by the time we get our revenue, I think there will be, we need to manage that expectation.
Should this project fail, and I was having this conversation with Joe before we came on air, should it fail to be successful? Because as you said, so many countries have explored oil before, and not all of them are exporting oil.
Yes.
Kenyans will be left with a very heavy financial burden to bear. Paint the picture for us.
I think the main thing is that Kenya will not suffer much about the financial burden itself, because the Talo itself that is handling the issue expects the revenue from the oil exporting, the oil deposits itself. It's not the public that will fund or the taxpayers that will fund that. And so that is one of the risks that we take in terms of the kind of project. That
so the risk is 100% solely on Talo oil. Kenyans will not be left with any debt whatsoever.
Yeah, that's what they do. They do the numbers before they come in. And so they look at, is it commercially viable from our end in terms of our business prospect? And so you discuss with government from that perspective that you're able to recoup your financing from that.
The president said it's going to be a journey. How long is the journey going to be?
The journey can be as long as it can be. I mean, there's no definite time. Well, the contract that they sign have milestones of what a contractor is supposed to do within certain timelines. But sometimes other things, I mean, and this is a reality in business. You know, sometimes what you have planned may not necessarily come out to be what you get. And I give you the example of Uganda. They discovered the oil back. It has taken them 13 years. They haven't gone to the market yet.
Okay.
So there are a lot of other things that need to be put in place. And I think that's where the conversation ought to be. He rightly said that the investor takes the risk. Kenyans, at this particular moment, we are not even investing a shillings trying to find this thing. Somebody comes, mobilizes finances and decides, okay, list me, you are allowed, let me try and see if I'll get something. Okay. If they get something and they're able to take it to the market, then they can be able to get their money back from the sale or from the proceeds of the sale of that product, in this case, crude. If they don't, they walk away. We don't compensate the investor and say, oh, by the way, you did a good job, you tried to find something, but since you did not find, we'll give you something to go back home. We don't. So I think it's also a balance, because as a country, we also need to understand that we are competing with the world in attracting the investment dollars. Okay. So yes, the journey can be as long as it can be. It can be shortened, because remember also, the resources belongs to the government. Okay. It is the responsibility of the government to put in place what normally in business circle they call conducive environment, both regulatory and fiscal. Okay. If those things are put in place, then there is no reason why a contractor will not proceed with the project. If those conditions or those that environment does not exist, then the contractor will not move forward, because he's also in business. Okay. He's not doing it for charity. So it is the onus of the government, in this case our government, to ensure that the things that are supposed to be put in place, the enabling environment, is there. For example, one of the issues that you need to be in place to evacuate our crude is a pipeline. That means the government needs to ensure that the land is available where all that will happen. It's a conversation that the government needs to have with the landowners across that belt. Okay. So you see that land in Kenya is very emotive. It could take 1 year, it could take 5 years.
And it could make the price of the project shoot.
It could make the price of the project shoot. Yeah. So there's a lot of, a lot of balls in there. No pun not intended.
Well, pun not intended. I'd like to bring the Kenyan into this conversation. One of our reporters went out to the field in the streets of Nairobi and had a conversation with Kenyans, particularly with revenue. The president was very ambitious. He told Kenyans, we've made money off this thing. And when you're told money has been made off a project that is part and parcel of who you are, a country that you come from, the next thing you'll always think about is, what is my cut? And this is what you had to say in the streets of Nairobi. Should it be equal to all the counties? The national government gets the bigger cut, or the people of Turkana? 75-25. What do you propose?
That's an interesting conversation. I love what Kenyans are saying. To me, it's good that one, they understand that there is a resource.
Okay.
But we all know that every resource in the country belongs to the people of Kenya. But the conversation allowed the localization or the local people benefiting. For a while, it has been, I think it has brought that issue forward. Because you see, oil is in Turkana today. Tomorrow, another country will find something. Another country will find something. We already have countries that have stuff.
So what do you propose? How do we go about it?
I think the formula as it is, since it was agreed upon by the national government, the county government, and the people of Turkana agreed to it, I think we are good to go.
Tony?
I think first we start from the constitutional perspective, that these resources are from the people of Kenya in custody of the Kenyan government. And so naturally it means that the national government is the one in charge of those resources. And so we have a situation that the people of Turkana feel that they need to be they need to get a share of it. I think they agreed with government they will get, I think, 5%. But it's still in contest. It's not yet agreed. And it also should be a bill that is passed in parliament, so it's yet to pass. So, you know, the main thing is that when you talk about revenue itself, in general, there are three parties. The contractor himself, who is invested and taken risks for it. Then there is national government, and then there is county government itself, which comes from the local perspective. And so that's the arrangement. So the problem we're having today is between the locals and national government itself in terms of agreeing on a revenue sharing model. And so that's one of the sticking points that we have today. I think from the other end of the contractor and government, the national government, I think that's agreed. So the dynamics are different. The sharing model is that people feel that these resources are for Kenyans, so it should be able to go to one basket as a consolidated fund, and it's distributed to everyone in Kenya to enjoy these resources. And so we still yet to have a proper perspective on an agreement on what's the right revenue sharing model, and it creates a risk out of that.
Oil prices are very volatile.
Yes.
It all depends on the international market.
Yes.
If it's stable in the Middle East, then there's stability.
Yes.
If one giant country decides to begin a war with another and place sanctions, it all affects the prices of oil.
Yeah.
And before the show, we were having this conversation and we were saying when recession hit the oil sector, Nigeria's economy suffered greatly. Kenya is getting into this space. How could it ensure that even in the long run, it safeguards itself or cushions itself from the shocks that come with the volatility of the market?
I think that's something you cannot cushion yourself with, if you look at the Nigerian perspective that you talked about. First, the arrangement within oil exporting countries is that there is OPEC,
Okay.
which decides mostly in terms of policy, especially pricing of the international market. It's a member organization and the main players who decide the oil prices. Nigeria is a part of that OPEC. Even one, I think the minister has sat as the head of OPEC, but they've still felt that they are not in command. The biggest decider of oil prices is always Saudi Arabia, because they're the largest people in that market. And so most of the other people trade. You don't have a voice to vote. It's about the pricing and dynamics on your production.
Yeah.
So if Nigeria itself has failed that it produces 2 million, it means Kenya cannot cushion itself. And those are risks that come up with oil exporting countries. You find that you might work on your exploration. Today we can agree on the contractor that we will price, and for calculating a breaking even point might be $60. In 2 years from now, you find that you're at $40.
Yeah.
And so that risk is always that they have to recoup their money. So you'll have to scale down you have to renegotiate your contracts again on how do they get their money back. So those are risks that always come with international oil exporting countries.
Yeah.
And so we have to be ready for that. The biggest problem that Nigeria has is that the economy is primarily dependent on oil. That's what the problem that they have. They have done little diversification of the economy. I believe Kenya, we have a diversified economy, so an addition of the oil prices, of oil revenue will just be an addition to the economy, and so we will not suffer such huge risks as Nigeria.
Well, there's a question I know you watching at home is really looking forward to, if you'll be feeling pain or ease at the pump. But just before we get into that, we are live on Facebook and YouTube, and you can catch that conversation there. Log on to our social media platforms, share the link with your friends who are not able to catch this conversation on TV, because we're about to ask that question. But before we get to that question, you want to add something on what Tony has said?
I would agree with him in most of the cases, but I think the only area that probably I would remind him, because he's an economist, just like myself, is that oil is driven by the demands of supply. I mean, the forces of supply and demand. So OPEC and OECD members just come to regulate the production, so that then that impacts on the prices.
Okay.
And I think that's what we witnessed in 14 to probably 17, early 18, where they did not come together to sort out the production. But when they came together to sort out the production, then the prices have more or less stabilized.
Okay.
But as a country, I think I would agree 100% that we are in a better position because we are diversified. And I think the key thing for us and the policy makers is to ensure that the revenues or the resources we get from oil is used to continue developing our other sectors. Otherwise, if we all of us leave whatever we are doing to go to oil and gas, then we will suffer from the popular dash disease, which has affected Nigeria for quite a while. But I think we are safe.
Okay.
As long as we can be able to manage that balance.
As we almost come to a close of this second bit of our conversations, will Kenyans be able to have a sigh of relief? Tony, don't break Kenyans' heart like that by laughing even before I finished asking the question. You're also laughing, Joe? Okay, gentlemen, take it away.
That's because you see, I think that's it's a very interesting question, because that's everybody's expectation. I think in the short term, probably not.
Okay.
In the long term, yes, I think there could be some benefits.
Tony?
I think, especially journalists, you guys try to raise temperatures for no reason.
No. It's the president himself. Wait. It's the president himself that declared Kenya an oil exporting country.
But he did not say that the price will come down.
The president said, we are now in business. Tony, if you see your father coming home and he's the sole breadwinner, what do you expect? Dinner is about to be made.
Okay, the perspective will be this way. I think we look at it from a Kenyan perspective. We have oil and we expect lower prices. But we need to look at an investor, or the contractor itself. You put yourself on Talo's position. You extracted oil, you want to sell it to the market. Do you sell it in Kenya where the prices will be low, or do you go to the international market where you get a larger margin and you can return your investment?
So what's the essence of having the oil if Kenyans can't?
Actually, it's not even about the contractor. I think the government has made the argument that, it is better for us as a country to actually export it and use the resources to buy finished product. As to whether that translates into cheaper or lower prices at the petrol stations, that's a different argument. But we would expect that in the long term, it will translate to cheaper fuel. But I understand the question of Kenyans that, and I have seen it even in my social media accounts, people ask, why are we not refining? Why are we selling crude? But the numbers, as is now, as he explained, the numbers do not support us processing the crude. Think about it. We have a node, which is a storage facility refinery. Uganda is already building one across the border. So there is no need for Kenya to build another refinery. If the case may be, we may buy the finished product from Uganda because it's cheaper. It could be cheaper maybe for us.
Yeah, because of transportation
cost. But it is, as things stand now, we are better off as Kenyans to sell the crude, use that resources to probably close the import bill. So that then it becomes a little bit cheaper for Kenyans.
The market finally is there's so many people that are exporting oil. In the African continent, there are people whose quality of oil, they said our sulfur is good, but it's waxy. So that's also another downside to our oil. How do we position ourselves aggressively in the market so we make money out of this business?
I don't think it's more positioning. This is a fast good moving good. And so the moment you have it in the market, you always have buyers that are coming in. Okay. So we don't need to position ourselves. I think it's just identifying that our processes are good. You're able to tame your costs so that you can enjoy much revenue out of it.
30 seconds. What's in it for Kenyans? That Kenyan watching at home, what's in it for them?
I think there is little for now in the short term. I think in the long term is where Kenyans might benefit.
With what?
In terms of revenue itself. Yeah, I think in the long run there's revenue that government might be able to recoup for.
Joe?
Do you want to ask what is net for Kenyans?
Do you have any good news?
A lot. Because I think there's a conversation we need to have another day about local content.
Yes.
Forget the revenue. There's a lot of business for Kenyans to do today, even as we head towards full-field development.
And you're one of those Kenyans who's doing that business?
Yeah, so I am benefiting from the industry, even before we start selling crude. And a lot of other businesses. The numbers you gave, 57% of money being spent by Talo is being paid to Kenyans.
Local contractors.
Local contractors. Those are local businesses, which means people are already benefiting. And I think that's the conversation we need to have. There is a law, the local content bill, which is still yet to be passed. The Production Petroleum Act got passed. But I think that's where, to me, that's the conversation. Forget about the money that will come at the end of the day. Right now, Kenyans are benefiting. Whether it's a mama boga who needs to supply a camp in Turkana, somebody selling vegetables, somebody supplying cars, somebody supplying all sorts of things. That, I think, for me, would be what Kenyans can take today, a low-hanging fruit today, as we wait for the prices to become better in the future.
The second bit of the show, bittersweet. Tony says, short term, not much. Long term, maybe, just maybe. Joe, on the other side, is telling you that there's so much more you can get out of this. Not just money, not just revenue. Local content has a lot of opportunities therein for you. That was their time to have a conversation. We take a short breather. When we come back, it's your time. Stay with Metropole TV.